I am, at heart, an anarchist. I believe that the best way for people to organise and to live is voluntarily, without oppression and without hierarchies to which they do not consent. I recognise, however, that this is a pipe dream, an ideal, a utopian vision that we may never be able to achieve. But that doesn't mean that it can't be something that we can strive towards. Recent events have shaken my utopian beliefs about direct democracy to the core. The modern world is interconnected, complex, difficult to understand. The more we're networked, the closer we are, but many people have been left behind in a widening political, economic, and social divide. Like it or not, and I make no judgment on the individuals concerned, those who voted for Trump, those who voted in particular for Brexit, were in the majority from relatively poor, deprived, and less educated backgrounds, less cosmopolitan areas. Those people divided and set apart in all the ways I just mentioned. And they've done things that will only harm themselves. This mirrors a problem we have in the court system when we pursue white-collar crime. It's an aspect of the reason that corrupt finance and banking so rarely faces true justice. There is an incredible shortage of people who are qualified to make intelligent and informed judgments in such cases. So it can be hard to form a jury that can understand the complexities of financial shenanigans and financial law, and to apply it to make a judgment from a position of knowledge. What chance, then, does the average voter have to understand and make an informed decision on complex geopolitical and economic matters? Are there ways we can change this state of affairs? Certainly. Greater investment in and availability of quality education makes a huge difference, but that means public investment at the state level, at least in the way things are currently constructed in our society. It's also something constantly being squeezed, along with welfare, wages, and other aspects that give people the time and capacity to retrain or to return to education. The other, more immediately available answer is technocracy. Technocracy traditionally means the rule of experts. We have resentment towards elites at present, and even towards experts in some quarters. An insane undermining of those who are best qualified to make important decisions about world-influencing events.
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts with organisations from acronyms.
The people of this country have had enough of experts.
Technocracy is not, however, very democratic, but then neither, in its way, is representative democracy. There is a way, perhaps, we could combine direct democracy and technocracy into one, to elect an executive to represent us and to enact legislation, but to directly influence the government on a day-to-day basis, and to make a qualified, common will understood. We live in a world of unprecedented interconnection. We all carry powerful computers and communications devices around in our pockets. We're wired in constantly to the sum total of human knowledge, and misinformation, alas, and we were able to express our views and opinions to the world via social media. Why not, if security concerns can be addressed, vote directly via these devices, not only in elections, but upon everything that faces our nations? Why not make access to these votes qualified, based upon age, qualification, or investment in the topic? How would the NHS best operate? That would seem to be a question for medical professionals, a qualification that would entitle you to a say. How should those operations be financed? That would seem to be a question for those who understand economics and costs. What response should our nation make to climate change? Environmental scientists, meteorologists, and others with suitable qualifications would seem to be the best people to make that kind of decision. And so it goes. A direct democracy of the individual, moderated by a necessary state apparatus and filtered through the necessity of a qualified expert opinion. But why stop there? Despite being ideologically an anarchist, I am pragmatically a democratic socialist. A mixed market with a policy of fairness, even-handedness, and equality of opportunity seems to me, to be the best solution to our problems, given the hand that we've been dealt. That doesn't mean, however, that we shouldn't always strive for greater freedom and autonomy. In 1953, Australian poet, social commentator and anarchist Harry Hooton published a rather prescient pamphlet called Anarcho-Technocracy, The Politics of Things. He understood that power, economic and otherwise, stemmed from access to machinery. He feared the rise of technicians as a ruling class, but argued that rather than to fear that and to tear it down, we should rise to become a part of that ruling class. He understood that a strike holds no fear for the ruling class if the factory workers are machines and cannot strike. He saw that technology can potentially abolish the state by removing its power and necessity, but that in the process it also abolishes huge swathes of people who do not want to be abolished.
This is one of the first McDonald's to start using automated kiosks to take orders. How it works is that instead of walking up to a traditional cash register and giving your order to a human, you walk up to a computer screen, swipe, and press on the long list of options to make your sandwich and your salad.
Hooton's conception of anarcho-technocracy was rooted in its period, the 1950s. While he saw a great deal of the oncoming social changes, he could not possibly have anticipated the full rapidity and power of the changes we have made with the internet, and increasingly with 3D printing and maker culture. We have democratized information already, with effects both good and bad. We're still adjusting societally to this, and we're lagging behind. The greatest educational tool in human history is being squandered, and while course information, books, and other tools and materials are available in this general access consciousness we call the internet, accreditation isn't. We could slash fees and make access to higher education universal at massively reduced cost, if we had the will, simply by allowing people to self-educate and then to apply for accreditation. This is a way of democratizing qualification and opening it up to the masses around the world far more equitably. There is no earthly reason why course materials and lectures from Oxford, Cambridge, MIT shouldn't be available online to everyone to educate themselves and to be accredited. As we democratize information, we now need to consider the democratization of things. 3D printing continues to get faster, more accurate, and more adaptable at an accelerated rate. We could invest in user-friendly, adaptable models at a national scale, allowing people to print and create, far more cheaply, things that they need in everyday life. Democratizing the technology would reduce costs, reduce shipping, reduce environmental impacts, and elevate many people out of the most desperate levels of poverty. It would raise the baseline standard of living and, combined with education, could create a whole new generation of designers and makers to help take us into the future. 3D printing is not the only way we can democratize technology and elevate people. People are not as self-sufficient as they could be, largely because of the devotion of time and energy required to do so, time they would rather spend on work or leisure. Not to mention it requires a certain amount of expertise. How many more people would grow some of their own food if it were more effortless? If it required less expertise? If it didn't demand of you that you become a full-time hobbyist? Vertical farming is relatively effort-free and can transform the window of even a high-rise apartment into a greenhouse for fresh herbs and vegetables. This betters their diet and reduces the economic strain on the poor, and it can be made from the simplest of things. Integrating rooftop gardens into new developments can benefit all residents, or all workers within business buildings. Who has the time to tend to such things though? It needn't be anyone. Robotics suitable to tending allotments and gardens are already being developed. If you don't have to tend, don't have to weed, don't have to plant, if an app will tell you what's ripe and ready to be picked, then what's the excuse not to use your land? Localized power grids can already exist and provide power independence down to the individual home. If you overproduce, it can also be a source of income. This is another thing that could be mandated for future construction and subsidised by the state to reduce costs in return for powerful societal and economic gains. As power independence and interdependence increases, the state would be withering itself away from the areas in which it would no longer be necessary. The final piece of the puzzle could be basic income. This would provide a baseline level of financial support for every citizen, and it would remove huge levels of bureaucracy. It would wither the state, remove stigma from the poor. It would simplify the tax system and free people's lives up to volunteer, to self-educate, to pursue their passions, and to live free. As jobs disappear to increasing automation, this appears to be the only way in which we can retain human happiness and ambition, and to prevent some sort of horrific future violence along Luddite or communistic lines. These kinds of changes need to start happening now. Piece by piece, bit by bit. Those who can afford to do so and who understand it already are making these changes. But for it to become accessible and democratized, the state needs to invest, to subsidize, and to make these technological changes in the material world available to all. Simultaneously, they need to continue to adapt to the informational reality of freedom in which we already find ourselves, and to stop resisting it. What state, though, especially in the corporatist corruption in which we find ourselves, will willingly put a gun to its own head and pull the trigger?
When I was just a baby.